The defensive line has a ton of competition. Who's ready to step up for Syracuse football? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. We are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are going over Syracuse football's defensive line for the upcoming 2025 college football season, which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, begins for Syracuse at the time of this recording in just 26 days, where the Orange, they travel south. They go to Atlanta, Georgia for a neutral site battle against the Tennessee Volunteers. So, who's starting for Syracuse at defensive tackle, defensive end, and overall thoughts on the defensive line? We're breaking it all down here on this show. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We're down to 3 position previews. We got the offensive line still to go. We got special teams in general to talk about. But first today, we are going over Syracuse's defensive line. Now, the defensive line last season for Syracuse was not exactly the strong suit of the team. If we're being honest, Syracuse a year ago let up 5 yards per carry, which was actually the worst total in the ACC last season. And I understand it's not just about the defensive line, but the defensive line does play a big part in run defense. And they're also important when it comes to getting to the quarterback, something that Syracuse was also not very good at last season relative to the rest of the ACC. They were 12th in the conference in sacks a year ago. And this unit is going to have to be better without 2 of their top defensive linemen from last season. Fadil Diggs, he graduated, got drafted into the NFL. And Murad Watson, who was a true freshman All-American last year, really showcased his potential to be potentially an NFL player one day along a defensive line. Very good for Syracuse, but he cashed in. He transferred to Texas. More power to him. So now Syracuse football has a tall task, not only just improving from last year along this defensive line, but doing it without 2 of their best players on the defensive line from last season. Now let's go over the defensive tackles. And in my opinion, there are 5 defensive tackles for 2 open spots. Right? Syracuse runs a 4-2-5 base defense under defensive coordinator Elijah Robinson. That means 4 down defensive linemen. You got 2 defensive ends, 2 defensive tackles. In no particular order, let's go over the 5 players who could potentially start along Syracuse for the defensive tackle position. You got Deion Tank Wilson, a 6'5", 305-pound redshirt senior. Wilson transferred to Syracuse before the 2024 season. Prior to that, he spent a year at New Mexico State, and before that, he was at Arizona for a few years. Last season, Deion Wilson, we did not see a whole lot of him, and that is because he started the first 4 games for Syracuse, but unfortunately, he suffered a near season-ending injury. Thankfully, he did come back to start the bowl game for Syracuse. But last year, you can kind of say it was a lost year for a guy like Deion Wilson. He made 13 tackles, 1 tackle for loss in 5 games. But according to Pro Football Focus, Deion Wilson won nearly 13% of his one-on-one pass rush matchups a year ago. For context, a first-round pick and a guy like Mason Graham over at Michigan won about 20% of his one-on-one snaps. So, hey, Deion Wilson Yeah, I get it. He's not Mason Graham, but he's actually pretty good at winning one-on-one battles, which is important for an interior defensive lineman. I do hope that we see a full season of Dion Wilson because I think that he could be in line for a big year for Syracuse football. And what do you think? Comment in the comment section below. Do you think that Dion Wilson is going to have a big year along Syracuse's defensive line? I'd love to see your thoughts in the comment section below. Next up, we got Rashard Perry, a 6'3", 295-pound junior. Perry took a step forward last season. In 2023, he appeared in 10 games for Syracuse, but mostly just in reserve, didn't do a whole bunch of production. But last year, he appeared in 11 games. He started 4 of those contests. He had 17 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and 1.5 sacks. Perry was a good retention for Syracuse football this offseason. He will play a lot for the Orange this year, assuming that he is, of course, healthy for the entire year. And even if he is not necessarily named a starter, Syracuse does rotate its defensive linemen pretty much every single play. So he is going to play a lot for Syracuse. And hey, even if he's not a starter, it's a good problem to have when you have a guy like Rashard Perry as a depth player along your defensive line. Then you got Chris Thomas, 6'6", 315-pound redshirt senior. Thomas is a transfer from this offseason. He spent the prior 2 years over at Marshall, and before Marshall, Chris Thomas was at Florida for a couple of seasons. Thomas is known as a run-stuffing defensive tackle, meaning he's not necessarily going to jump out on the stat sheet. His main job is to cause chaos in the backfield and stop the run. So you're not going to see a lot of sacks for Chris Thomas this season. But last year was his best year in pretty much every statistical category. He played in 13 games for Marshall. He started 12 of those 13 games, 42 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, and 1 sack. He did play a couple of games against power conference opponents, those being Virginia Tech and Ohio State, and he combined for 5 tackles and 1 tackle for loss. So Chris Thomas, a solid pickup for Syracuse in the transfer portal this offseason. Then he got George Rooks, 6'5", 295-pound redshirt senior. Rooks transferred to Syracuse this offseason as well, following 2 years over at Boston College. Before Boston College, Rooks was at Michigan for a couple of seasons. In fact, George Rooks is the son of Syracuse great George Rooks, who was the 1991 Big East co-defensive player of the year. Now, speaking of the George Rooks that is on this year's team, here's what he did at Boston College last year. He appeared in all 13 games for them. He started 11 of those contests, 26 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and 1 sack. Overall, it's a good pickup whenever you get someone in the portal who's got plenty of starting experience in a power conference. That means you know that they can play at this level. And hey, he's coming over from Boston College. That's in the ACC. There's familiarity, obviously, there with a guy like George Rooks. Now, if you look at Pro Football Focus, he did not necessarily have the highest grade a year ago, which we touched on more in depth when we were going over when George Rooks originally signed with Syracuse in the transfer portal. However, the one category where George Rooks really seemed to excel at last year, and I think it's really going to help Syracuse this season, is he graded out as a pretty good tackler. Tackling was a big problem for Syracuse on defense a year ago. Oftentimes, they were in pretty good position to make a play, but they would never get the ball carrier down on that first try. And when you don't get the ball carrier down on the first try, obviously that could lead to big plays, which we saw plenty of last season, unfortunately. But it's also the little things, right? If you don't make that tackle in the first try, well, that ball carrier can get 1 or 2 extra yards. So instead of maybe 2nd and 7, now it's 2nd and 5. And that makes a big difference what you're going to do on 2nd down, 2nd and 5 versus a down like 2nd and 7. So overall, with a guy like George Rooks, not sure if he's going to be a starter or not, even though we know he's capable of starting games. He did it at Boston College, but he should help Syracuse in tackling, which was a big weakness for them last season. And then finally, you got Elijah Fuentes-Cundiff, 6'4", 295-pound redshirt senior. He has spent all 4 of his prior seasons over at Syracuse. He's appeared in 32 games for the team with 1 career start, which I believe came in 2022. He's a veteran depth player. I'm not expecting him to be a major contributor for Syracuse along the defensive line, but nevertheless, a solid depth piece to have for this team for this upcoming season. What are your thoughts on Syracuse's interior defensive line? Comment in the comment section below. And who do you think is going to start for Syracuse along the interior? Comment in the comment section below. We're going to talk about that later on in the show. But first, coming up, we're going to discuss the defensive ends for Syracuse football. Guys who are going to get after the quarterback this upcoming season. Let's talk about it in just a second. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. And golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36 holes, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. Let's go over the defensive ends for the Orange for the upcoming 2025 college football season in this Syracuse football full defensive line preview podcast. Before we get into the individuals that make up the defensive end position for Syracuse football, let's just start off by saying this. Syracuse football is going to need these guys to really step up this upcoming season. Syracuse football, we already went over last year, was not necessarily very good at getting to the quarterback. And this season, their top 3 guys in sacks from a year ago are all gone. Fadil Diggs last season led the team with 7.5 sacks. Marlo Wax actually came in second place. He only played in 8 games for Syracuse last year and is a middle linebacker, yet he finished with 4.5 sacks for Syracuse last year. And believe it or not, in third for the Orange in sacks in 2024, even though he did it all in 1 quarter against Holy Cross. You can go fact check me right now on College Reference. King Joseph Edwards. That's right. King Joseph Edwards was third on Syracuse in sacks because he got all 3 of his sacks against Holy Cross in 1 quarter, and nobody got more than that aside from 2 players. Pretty weird. But it's not just on the players, don't get me wrong. It's also on the coaching staff and the system in general. Too often times last year, I felt that Syracuse was not aggressive enough when it comes to getting to the quarterback. Oftentimes you would see on third down, which is an obvious pass rushing situation sometimes, Syracuse would do a defense that I didn't really like. And a lot of you complained about it as well over the course of last year. They would rush 3 players and drop 8 into coverage. The worst example, of course, being 4th and 9 against Stanford at the end of the game. We don't have to talk too much about that moment. But the point being is that if you rush 3 and drop 8, unless you have 3 NFL players along your defensive line that are getting after the quarterback there, you're not getting to the quarterback rushing 3 and dropping 8. So that hurts the defensive line and accumulating sacks. Now, let's get into the defensive ends, shall we? The guys who still need to step up regardless of the system. David Omoperiola 6'3", 260-pound redshirt sophomore. Last year, David O, he took a step forward in development, which is always good to see. Similar to a guy like Rashard Perry on the interior defensive line. In 2023, David O, he redshirted, so he didn't play. In 2024, David O appeared in 12 games for Syracuse and started the final game of the year, which was the Holiday Bowl. His stats, they don't jump across the screen. He had 12 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and half a sack. David O has a lot of potential. Young player entering his 3rd season of college football, 2nd in which he is going to play a significant amount. I think he is someone who could have 5 sacks this season. I don't think that is an unreasonable expectation if the guy is going to be used as a pass rusher for Syracuse in 2025. And hey, what are your expectations for David Omoperiola this season? Do you think he could be a breakout star for Syracuse? Comment in the comment section below. You also got Kevin Jobity, 6'4", 300-pound senior. He has played all 3 of his prior seasons at Syracuse, and last season, he started the first 5 games of the year for the team, but unfortunately after that, he suffered a season-ending injury. His stats, he had 10 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, and half a sack. Overall, with Kevin Jobity, he has 5 career sacks in 26 career games. I would like him to double that. I would also like if Kevin Jobity can have 5 sacks this upcoming season, or at least have a career high for a year. I don't think he's ever had 3 sacks in one season. So it would be nice if a guy like Kevin Jobity, now a senior, could really step up and elevate his play this season. Next up is David Reese, 6'2", 250-pound redshirt senior, entering his 8th season of college football. That's right, folks. David Reese is entering his 8th year of college football. Prior to Syracuse, David Reese spent the past 2 seasons over at Cal. And in those 2 seasons, Reese accumulated 11 total sacks. In fact, in 2023, David Reese was an all Pac-12 player. Yes, the Pac-12 did exist a couple of years ago. David Reese was, I believe, a 4th team selection that season. He's a very underrated pickup for Syracuse this offseason. Part of the reason why he doesn't have the highest transfer portal grade in the world is because he's entering his 8th year of college football. You know the deal with a guy like David Reese. He is here for 1 season only. You pretty much know what to expect from a guy like David Reese. Probably going to give the team around 5.5 sacks, give or take. But he's a good player. And he's going to have to be a good player this season because he's pretty much the direct replacement for Fidel Diggs this upcoming year. And he's also tasked with being a leader. Again, 8th year of college football. He has seen it all, done it all, been in multiple power conferences already. He's going to have to be a leader, and he's also going to have to produce for Syracuse football this upcoming year. After David Reese, you got Dennis Jacques, 6'4", 265-pound senior. He has spent all 3 of his prior seasons with Syracuse football. He has appeared in 22 career games with 8 total starts. Last season, Dennis Jacques appeared in 10 games for the team, 5 starts, 23 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and 2.5 sacks. Very similar to a guy like Kevin Jobity. Does a guy like Dennis Jacques have more in the tank for Syracuse football? Again, last year, 2.5 sacks. Can he double that this upcoming season, or at least outproduce that? I guess we'll find out in 2025. And finally, you have Isaiah Hastings, 6'4", 310-pound redshirt junior. Hastings spent his first 2 collegiate seasons over at Alabama before he transferred to Syracuse ahead of last season. And last year, he appeared in all 13 games for Syracuse with 2 starts, but he only made 4 tackles. So as of right now with Isaiah Hastings, I'm only projecting him to really be a depth defensive end, but who knows? Maybe he can blossom and become a premier pass rusher for Syracuse this upcoming season. So those are some of the players that represent Syracuse along the defensive line, specifically defensive end. Comment your thoughts on the defensive line in the comment section below, because coming up, We'll give our predictions for who is probably going to start for Syracuse in the beginning of the season and give our overall thoughts on Syracuse's defensive line. Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. Coming up, starter predictions and last thoughts with the defensive line. Stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you have been dying to see. And live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you could save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. And hey, you're tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Well, Gametime's Zone Deals pick the best seats in your section for you. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. As I stated in the position battle and the position quote-unquote safe podcasts, I believe there's only one player along Syracuse's defensive line that is pretty much a lock to be a starter for the 2025 season. And I think it's David Reese. And comment in the comment section below if you agree with me, disagree with me, or you think there's another lock along Syracuse's defensive line to start. But as we've talked about with David Reese, nobody along Syracuse's defensive line has the resume like Reese has. 11 sacks in a power conference over the past 2 seasons, an all-conference player as recent as 2023. He's most likely the Fidel Diggs replacement, and he is a leader for Syracuse football. So, he's pretty much a lock to start, but you still got 3 more players along Syracuse's defensive line that also have to start alongside of him because Syracuse runs, again, a 4-2-5 base defense. So David Reese is probably going to be one of the defensive ends. I think the 2 starting defensive tackles are Dion Wilson and Chris Thomas. And I think the other defensive end spot is going to go to David Omaperiola. I think that is the biggest battle, though, along the defensive line is that second defensive end spot, because I could see a guy like Kevin Jobody or Dennis Jaquez winning it. Those are both veteran players with a lot to prove. I believe they're both entering their final season of college football. Obviously, after college, well, a lot of these guys want to go to the NFL, so this is really their last chance to prove that they can play in the National Football League. That being said, I like David O's potential again for this upcoming season. So right now, I'm penciling him in as the other starting defensive end for Syracuse football. Now, last thoughts on the defensive line, all right? This is not exactly the Purple People Eaters 2.0, okay? I don't see Alan Page anywhere along Syracuse's defensive line. But the expectation for Syracuse, going back to the very beginning of the podcast, is that they got to be better. I understand there's no Murad Watson. I understand there's no Fidel Diggs. I understand that at times the system, particularly on third downs when they're rushing 3 and dropping 8, isn't exactly ideal when it comes to getting to the quarterback. But still, last season, they were worst in the ACC in yards per carry allowed, 5 yards per carry to be exact. And they were 12th in the ACC in sacks. They're playing against some tougher competition this upcoming season. And if Syracuse's defensive line does not step up, you're going to see those good quarterbacks really carve Syracuse. It's just what's going to happen. You're going up against Cade Klubnik. You're going up against Tevin Jennings, Carson Beck, assuming that he is healthy, Darian Mensah. How about the opener against Tennessee? Syracuse is playing some pretty good quarterbacks. Now, the key with pretty good quarterbacks is get in their face. Make them feel uncomfortable. Plenty of quarterbacks could sit in the pocket, roll to their left or right, and make throws when they're not under pressure. But how many of them could do that when they are under pressure? Syracuse's defensive line, bottom line, is going to have to step up this season and be better than what they were last year in order for this team to be at least pretty good on defense. I still have faith that the offense is going to store, maybe not as much as last year, but they're going to store. This defensive line is the key for Syracuse football. Comment your thoughts in the comments section below on the defensive line. Do you think that it's going to be better than it was last season? Do you think that Syracuse is going to rush 3 and drop 8 as much as they did a year ago? Comment in the comments section below. As far as what is coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the near future, obviously there are still a couple more position preview podcasts to go over. Offensive line preview, special teams unit in general preview, because we're not going to do a 30-minute podcast talking about kickers, right? Or a 30-minute podcast on just kick returners. We're going to make the special teams its own position preview podcast. Those are 2 podcasts that will be coming up either this week or next week on Locked On Syracuse. I promise you, we're getting to every single position group. But specifically for tomorrow and Wednesday, these next 2 podcasts are going to be about you. That's right, folks. I'm going to be reacting to your hot takes for Syracuse this season. Tomorrow, reacting to your hot takes for Syracuse's offense for 2025. Already seeing some good comments over on Twitter. You can comment at LO_Syracuse to share your thoughts, and they could be featured in tomorrow's podcast. So be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments section over on Twitter at LO_Syracuse. And on Wednesday, reacting to your hot takes for Syracuse's defense for 2025. I already saw someone quote tweet my post saying, I think Demetrius Samuel is going to lead the country in interceptions. Now that's what I'm talking about. That's a hot take we can all react to here on Locked On Syracuse. So again, give your thoughts. You can do it right here in the comments section below on this podcast. You can go on Twitter at LO_Syracuse, your hot takes for Syracuse football in 2025. So that's what's coming up on this podcast in the near future. And thank you for making us your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On Portal Show with football recruiting expert Brian Smith. He's got the latest rumors and signings, plus the keys to recruiting. You can be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal Podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse so this channel can grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. I will see you all again soon.